again, briefly talked a little bit about the project. We've been involved in this since the beginning, 2010, when Cornell came to visit us at Cornell, and working through some of the ideas about the project and where we'd be moving from here. So basically what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about disabilitystatistics.org for those folks who aren't familiar with it. And then just give it introductions to a quick tour of the Rehabilitation Dataset Directory, which is, again, a tool that Ken mentioned, as well as the repository directory development that we're in the process of, that we're hoping to get some feedback and suggestions either now or through email about that. Again, it's something in process, and so we'd love to get other people's feedback and ideas about sort of content, as well as the way we're presenting it. This is Cornell on a sunny day with probably a little bit of white snow on the ground right now, but and a lot colder than here. It was 10 degrees this morning when my wife woke up. So, okay, so disability statistics. So it's been basically the leading resource for disability statistics for 17, 18 years now. Its original focus was to provide estimates from multiple data sources, so people could go to this one place and find information about disability without having to try to navigate the Census Bureau's not necessarily terribly user-friendly interface to try to find specific topical data and information. Been the first hit on Google when you search for disability statistics for pretty much that 18 years now. Spent a lot of time doing usability and accessibility testing through our web team. Is just incredible. And we don't just put information out there. We actually test it with users and say, okay, what's working, what's not working, have them actually navigate through. So it's a pretty extensive process to make sure people can actually find find the information they're looking for and make sure that it's actually things work and cognitive for people who are actually using the site, rather than just, well, what the web designer thinks, oh, this is going to work. Quite often it's not actually the way people actually navigate the sites, is what, so you can often be surprised. So we've done a lot of that. It's responsive web design, which means it'll actually work on your laptop, on your computer, desktop, on your phone. So it's pretty nice to be able to, if you're looking for information, you can just look it up right on your smartphone and find it there. And as part of the CLDR, we expanded the website, starting in about 2010 to provide additional tools and develop additional tools for rehabilitation researchers. So this is just a screenshot of disability statistics. I'll be navigating through here a little bit so you can see live what it actually looks like. So basically, when UTMB came to us, they were aware that there's lots of rehabilitation relevant secondary data available, but it's really hard, it's hard to find. How do you find it? What's actually out there? Which might be relevant. Just how do you find it? Again, you can Google search it, but you end up with so many hits that, or nothing at all, or nothing that's relevant. You have to dredge through it all. And then, how do you get to them? And so, in collaboration with UTMB, we developed a couple of products to try to help address that need, ease that process and make it easier for people to find data and get it out in front of people, the rehabilitation researchers, which tended not to use secondary data at that time, and that's what a lot the past 10 years. So this project has been trying to encourage that. And so the idea was to try to make it more available, more accessible for researchers and increase the awareness. So on the website, these are the links to the dataset directory and the variable catalog on our website. So the dataset directory is basically, it's a searchable database designed to help researchers identify relevant data. And I'll show you actually on demonstration, but it basically includes some summaries of the information that about the general, like a paragraph or two about what the data set's about. I go through all the documentation for each data set and basically read through all the documentation, go through the code books, go through the surveys, look at the actual wording, trying to identify, okay, are they asking questions about certain specific disability types like autism, or are they identifying stroke? Are they identifying other sorts of health conditions, or what sort of questions are they asking about disability? Are they including ADLs, IDALs, that kind of thing. Basically going through everything and the best I can to try to identify, okay, what is the information actually collected? How is it collected? What is the sample size? Sort of the relevant basic information that I felt would be useful to the researchers just as a quick overview, okay, might this data set be useful or relevant to my interests? It includes study design and sampling, the contact information, links to the technical resources, and links directly to the data set too. So, oh, this looks interesting. Oh, let's go here and see what actually, dig deeper. Provide some strengths and weaknesses. Again, this is sort of a very overview kind of thing, but at least if there's some issues with sample size or some significant strengths and unique things about the data set, we try to mention those. Links to related data sets, so it's not only just gives you, okay, this is one data set, but in certain circumstances where, like I don't know how many people are familiar with the HRS, where there's, that it was started in the US, but now it's actually expanded to, I think it may be as many as 15 different countries now, a very similar sort of effort. And so we've actually have links to all of the other data set descriptions as well. So if you're interested this way, you can also look at all these other possible data sets, and we have information about those as well. And currently, we've got about almost 90 data sets available. We've got about 6 in process. We've been working with ADEP at ICPSR to document all of the data sets they're working with on this project as well. So that's sort of as they put things up online and get them all prepared, then we go back through and work through all the documentation they provide and develop descriptions, so you can, all of the ADEP studies by the end of the project will be also on the directory as well. And if you're interested in the sort of data sets we've got involved, we actually have a listing. Sorry about the small font size, but had to try to fit it in 2 pages. So if you're interested in that, you can sort of take a look at what sort of the resources are available there. And also in the bottom there, we list the ones that are under review and process, and other ones that ADEP has documented that we haven't had a chance to work on quite yet. Okay, so this is just a screenshot of the dataset directory. So what I'm going to do now is just okay. So this is the Disability Stats website. If people are interested. We've got develop annually new estimates based on the American Community Survey. This is a very popular thing. You can look at prevalence rates, employment rates, all this information by broken down by a variety of different aspects. Just so you can just do a quick overview here, so you can select whatever demographic information and then you can actually basically click on it, and then I'll just do a quick search here just so you can see. So this is what a lot of people come to our website for, is to be able to, okay, how many people have a disability in the US based on the American Community Survey? We have maps, we have tables, we have descriptions. So this is sort of our, what a lot of folks go to, but we also provide the research tools here. And again, I'm just going to focus primarily on the Rehabilitation Dataset Directory, but we also have a variety of other resources here that could be useful, and many of which have been developed through this project. Here's the Rehabilitation Dataset Directory. And so what we've done, there's a number of different ways you can actually do a search here. You can actually just search for specific terms. If you're interested, you can just see if there's anything about like youth or students or whatever. You could search there. But we also have tagged all of the data sets in different areas. So if you're interested specifically in data sets that have been collected in North America or in Asia, which ones we've got documented here. We've got 7 different continents. We also got listing of countries right now. We actually have, I think it's 40. We just added a number of. I think we have about 47 or 48, maybe almost 50 now, different data sets that have data on different countries. So if you're interested in data that was relevant in Japan. Oops. Okay. Easier to look at the screen here. Submit, and then you can see which. I guess this is just the one Japanese study on aging and retirement. So this is sort of the first level Shows the study design and its longitudinals, it's survey-based data, individual level, includes data access requirements. There's and so includes some additional notes. In this case, there's a very to be able to access some of the data, you have to have you have to actually, I think, be in Japan to be able to access those. So it's not an everyday kind of data set that everyone can use, although the basic one you can access more easily. Japan, if you wanted more information, you can just click on the full profile. Hopefully this works. All right. And this brings up all the details, so the data set name, the acronym, the summary, some of the key terms, aging, longitudinal, health, social participation, study design, the type of data, the specific health conditions that were identified in the survey. So again, this is one of the time-consuming parts, actually going through all the documentation, trying to look at, okay, what are the questions asked, what are they covering? Some of the other disability measures that may not necessarily be a specific health condition, but are other types of measures. Some of the topics, the sample population, sample size, again, the continent, the country, the geographic coverage, and also specificity. Some data sets you can actually get down. If there's a national data set, you may be able to get down to the state or more local level. So just so if people wanted to look at what's different in states, there are a lot of national data sets you can't get down to that level. So if you wanted to do that, you can't use that data set. So that's some of the information that we felt could be potentially useful. The collection mode, what years it was collected, strengths, limitations, and then we have the links. So this link here will bring you straight to that specific data set's website where they actually provide more additional information. So again, this looks interesting. You can go here and go to the site and actually read up more on that specific data set. Also, many people may be interested. Okay, this looks interesting, but is there any sort of summary information that's out there? How many people with who maybe have experienced strokes or something like that? I try to go through and identify any documentation that might break things down in ways that might be useful for, this is a quick overview of what information actually is collected and what sort of sample sizes you might be able to expect. Prevalence rates if it's a specific disability type or health condition. So you can, the summary table of reports link goes there. So the different components. Many of the data sets are actually broken up into multiple data sets. And so this sort of gives you a sense of, okay, how is the data set structured? Is it just one single data set, or is it broken into different components that you may need to merge or work with similarly? And then this is the similar and data sets, which I mentioned, so these are links to all of the other related data sets, longitudinal retirement data sets that are very similar. So I'm interested in this one, but actually I didn't know that they did this in Canada and Korea and and India, Mexico, and Europe, a whole bunch of countries listed in that one. So it's sort of an opportunity. So you can sort of expand your exploration, and each of these links to another description. Basically very similar to this, describing that particular study, and then also included other selected papers and technical papers that may be of interest to give you. Again, you can go to explore this a little bit more and determine whether that might be a useful data set for your research purposes. So let's just go back a bit here. So we've also have a variety of different disability measures that we have tried to document. So if they're asking specifically about, if they're having some measures about intellectual disability or mental health disability, try to tag those so people can find them more easily. Got 40 different health conditions that we listed that could be potentially related to specific potentially disabilities, including like stroke, and also if you're interested in data set of stroke, just click there, and then you just do the search. The other thing we've done, and since we're working with ADEP, We also have noted, let's see, I'm going to find it back here. It's a long list. Let's see, country, close up some of these. You can actually do a search for all of the ADAP data sets under data access. So the data is archived on ADAP itself. You can just click there. And again, we're always a little bit behind because as ICPSR pulls up their, develops the data sets, and then they hand it off to us, and then we're working on documenting it. And so it's usually a little bit of a delay there. But then these are all of the different, let's see, yeah, so like the, tracings of lesion after stroke, the Atlas thing here. So that's what we've got. Actually, that's not quite right. There may be some problems with that now. I have to double check what's going on there. So what we've done here in terms of the repositories is tried to follow a similar sort of process. We've got, at this point, we have 4 repositories listed. And actually, so in the documentation, or in your folders, you'll see Ken had developed a listing here of data set, or of repositories that were had potential content related to rehabilitation that were of interest. We've documented the first 4 at this point, just as a sort of a first attempt. Now, repositories are a very different animal than data sets. Data sets generally are fair, they're relatively compact. There are certain topics that they're covering. They generally don't change a huge amount, even if they're longitudinal. They're relatively consistent. Repositories, on the other hand, they can contain dozens, hundreds, even thousands of different data sets. They usually have some specific some sort of focus to them, but they're also often adding. Not only have many many different data sets, but they could be collected in a whole variety of different ways. Could shift. They have many different topical areas. They could be adding new ones on a daily basis. So trying to put something out here to a level where it provides information that would help people say, oh, well, this is actually something else that might be interesting to explore. But without saying, they've got 1,000 data sets when tomorrow it may be 1,012. So trying to sort of try to get that balance. So it's a little simplified, more simplified. So these are the ones that we've documented at this point. So I'll just take so one of the things we're interested in, if people have any suggestions about other repositories that you think would be useful for us to include in our on the site, we'd love to hear about that, and also the sort of information we're including on the repositories that I'll show you in just a minute. If there's other information you think that would be useful to researchers that we think we might be able to reasonably include in the descriptions. Again, keeping in mind that as this grant sort of sunsets, we won't be able to update anything, or there'll be very minimal ability to do that. So we need to sort of keep it useful and hopefully not include information that's going to be out of date within a year or two. So basically what we've done is we've developed a very similar sort of interface for each of the repositories. Again, the name, the acronym, the general theme or special population, a summary, key terms. In this case, this was TBI, who the sponsoring agency entity was, the sorts of data that's typically collected. Again, this may not be complete. It's about the best we could do, given that things are always constantly changing. And this is what was listed or included somewhere within their main website. But it's also something that's hard to go through and identify everything. But this is the best we could do with given the limitations. Some of the strengths and limitations. Again, the website is there. The repository. So one of the things that I found was particularly interesting, and as I was starting to explore the repositories, is that many of them have sort of specialized tools that make it a lot easier to navigate their specific repository, special, like in this case, FitBar has actually special tools that allows you to validate. For people who are submitting data, they actually have special tools that help validate the data automatically to sort of identify issues, make sure that the data that you're submitting actually follows all their rules. They have many rules. So that's they're tools both at the submission end as well as the researcher end in terms of identifying data sets that may be of interest, as well as some so this has like this various query tool which basically can pull data from the repository and allows you to filter data and then download it. So you have to download the whole data set. You can actually say, I'm only interested in these particular variables, this particular area, and pull that rather than getting the whole thing. And then links to where the actual tools are in the user guides, which explain in more detail what the different tools are. Data submission requirements, links to what the data submission process might be, how you access to the repository, what are the requirements. So this is something else we also document on all the data sets. Some are restricted data, some are public use data, some require they're public use, but you have to complete some forms or actually provide your plan of research to see if that's, and then they determine whether it fulfills what they feel is their appropriate use of that data set. And then other papers that may be relevant to the repositories. Or summaries of that information there. I'd love it if people have an opportunity. I know we're pretty much almost at the end of my presentation here, but if people have any thoughts about the repository, about the sort of information provided. So basically, one of the things we've done too is when people do a search on the data directory, it actually will pull up the repositories as well if they fit in those terms. Given the sort of the broad content that many of the repositories cover, basically it sort of oftentimes it'll pull up at the bottom of the search list other repositories that you may want to search, so people can sort of look at the basic summary information about the repositories. Well, maybe I'll do that jump and take a look at this repository because this looks like this may cover that topical area. Again, because they're always evolving and adding new data sets, we can't keep on top of those. But at least that gives you people that pointer. Well, take a look at this also, and then use their tools to be able to search at the repositories themselves. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. Yes?
How much staff time is required to keep this current and keep this going and constantly tested? Is it a half-time person, full-time person? What does it take to keep this engine well-oiled?
Yeah, well, we actually went through, we had about 50 or 60 data sets at the beginning of this cycle, and it's a significant process. So we actually went back through all of the data sets, all the information we had done up to that point at the beginning, in the past, earlier on in this grant process, and reviewed all of those and tried to update them and things. And it's not an insignificant process because hopefully. They usually don't document what sort of changes have we done in the past 5 years. Are we making adjustments to this survey? So you actually have to do it properly. You have to go through all of the documentation again. So it's pretty much almost starting from scratch. Although you started, but often the Census Bureau will note changes over a certain period of time, but they don't always do that properly. They don't always catch everything. I've run into a few things with the BLS, which you think would be documented. They actually have documentation about what changes have been made, and we ran into something in the CPS like, well, we noticed this change. Like, oh yeah, we didn't document that. Well, we'll do that next time when we get around to it.
But that requires a lot of vigilance.
It does, yeah.
I keep thinking all the time to keep it current and trying to keep the end user in mind. That means really devoting pretty significant resources to doing the drill downs on each data source and making sure it's current, the links are current and everything.
Right. Yeah. So the part of the planning, hoping to move forward is to do some automated link checking, at least. So at a minimum, I know that actually fixing. Like most data sets don't change that much. There may be some tweaks to them, but there's not usually huge changes in the overall summary and some of the other information there. But we definitely want to have at least make sure that the links to the data sets, the links to the papers and things, or at least those where they can get more additional information are correct. And so our plan is to implement some automated link testing. So if there are bad links coming up, then we'll go back and and check and go back into the documentation or to the interface to make sure that at least those are current. So even if some of the information may be a little bit out of date, at least people can still get to where they need to go and explore the data set more carefully. Because basically, if you're doing research in a specific data set, you're going to have to go to that level anyway. So this is more sort of that first metadata level. But yeah, that's definitely an important thing, and that's something that would be nice if we could figure out some way of updating things more easily rather than just the links. But it's a very time-intensive process to develop these descriptions, especially the level of working through the surveys and trying to see, okay, are there any changes? That sort of thing is not necessarily clearly documented in any other upper level of the documentation other than going through the surveys themselves.
A lot of filtering, a lot of drilling down.
It is, yeah. So we do the best we can. It's not perfect. And actually, welcome any suggestions. If people look at a description, if it's a data set that they've had archived and look at it and say, this doesn't look right, or this isn't quite right, or using words isn't appropriate, we'd love to get your feedback so we can fix it. We do the best we can given the documentation that we're provided. But we're not actually going into the, I'm looking at the documentation, I'm actually not actually analyzing and working with the data set itself. And as you all know as researchers, that's the point where you actually see where some of the changes may have occurred or things may not be quite as accurate. So if you have any comments on any data set, please contact me either at my email wae1@cornell.edu or through the disability statistics. Yeah.
One question you still didn't answer yet, and that is, what kind of staff time do you devote to it? How much staff time do you allocate for this, and you have the budget for to keep this going?
So I've been working on this project about 25% of my time.
And it's time as well.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Yeah. Luckily, our web team has developed an interface where I can actually, all of this information I can enter directly, so that it's not something that I have to involve someone else to upload data. So it's a little bit more flexible now than it was initially when we initially developed the interface. But also a lot of my time has been involved in trying to develop the new interface. Working with UTMB in terms of getting they're often providing descriptions. Mal and his team have been working on providing descriptions. I take those and sort of delve deeper in some of the documentation to sort of get things into the categories and all that. So that's another effort that I go into.
Yes. Yeah. So across the fields that might be studying disability, there's variation, a lot of variation in terms of how disability is defined and conceptualized.
Right.
And so, how have you considered that as you're listing these various studies and repositories?
Yeah. So what we've done, and this has sort of been an ongoing development, and defining what disability is, it's just it's a huge thing. And so we basically try to stay on a more general level rather than going necessarily too deeply, because it's just too hard to get into that. So like the American Community Survey, I don't know if you're familiar with the 6-question disability sequence that has been used since 2008, that has been disseminated through now most of the national level data sets that have anything to do with health at all. So we've we have that actually. So if people are interested, you can actually click on just the 6-question sequence, so people can identify those. Basically, we've been trying to. We worked with other researchers and doing our user testing and trying to get suggestions of what sort of categories people were interested in that thought would be useful. We needed to keep it a high enough level so that we could sort of, okay, ADLs, IADLs, okay, that's that. We're not going into the, okay, which ADLs and IDLs are they asking about? So yes, we've sort of been batting it forth. If there are suggestions you might have, at this point it may be a little bit too late to do too many significant changes. But we try to keep, also I think at this point we have about 17 categories right now. And if you build that list too long, you're not going to be able to, it will make it useful for that one person who wants that one disability type, but maybe not so useful for other purposes. So we try to keep it, try to balance that out in terms of specificity and more generally, more general to make it useful for people. And then they would have to go into the data set to be able to actually look at, okay, what are the specific questions that were used, or tools, whatever used, that were to identify that disability type. But it's not easy. We did the best we could at that point. We worked with, I think, the Survey on Income and Program Participation, which sort of asks us a laundry list of disability questions. We tried to use that to some extent as a sort of a starting point also, and sort of identified ones that we thought would be of greatest interest or most useful to that that meta level.